Hi everyone, it's Chris speaking. Welcome back. I spoke a little bit last time about creating a dysphoria series, and today is going to be sort of part two of that series. And I want to talk to you all about a concept of dormant dysphoria. And what I mean by that is a dysphoria that you don't know is present, or only when you sort of start this journey does it become apparent that you were experiencing dysphoria, but you didn't know what it was and didn't have the language to speak about, or really, I guess, experience it to its full extent. I think for a lot of us, myself included, who are a little bit older, and we sort of reach out to these online communities like YouTube or Reddit or just online sources of information, it's a young person's game. You've got your alphas in there, so your 16 to your 24-year-olds who are quite opinionated without a lot of life experience on the back end, being opinionated on these subjects. And I found that when I was sort of searching stuff to do with being transgender. So when I started looking for information, the idea of not needing dysphoria to be trans was a trend that was happening throughout the transgender sort of YouTubers that I was looking at, and that freaked me out a little bit. That word transgender was being thrown out sort of every which way, and it became a word that was at the forefront of my mind. By hearing that word, it sort of instilled this fear that I was faking it, because I didn't really understand what was happening in my own brain. And I'd been fighting myself on, even having something like dysphoria and trying to convince myself that I was fine. Just because it was dormant doesn't mean it's not there. So when this whole process started for me, I had to take a long look at my past. I had to try and find signs that I was transgender and I didn't know it. I was looking at times when I was uncomfortable, and it started a whole process. So as someone who now follows a lot of pages and tries to be helpful on those pages to people coming out a little bit older than their early 20s or even in high school, I think it's become important to really talk about and acknowledge this idea of a dormant dysphoria. So a lot of us don't know until we're a little bit further on in life, and there are a lot of us who do know when they start going through puberty, even younger, that they're not in the right body. But if you're like me, there are many more of us out there who don't figure ourselves out until well after high school. Some of us know, and we don't know how to put it into words. Some of us don't feel safe coming out, and we stay hidden for decades. And some of us have, like me, had that catalyst of a moment where you go, oh shit, and everything sort of falls into place. I personally didn't know that I had dysphoria. I didn't know that the things that I had been uncomfortable with had another word that wasn't dysmorphia. And when I was discovering my discomfort, I was worried that I was just making it up. I thought I was making it up because I hadn't realised in the past 27 years of my life. So I had to look back for moments that I was uncomfortable with, or things that didn't quite make sense, but sort of made me feel shitty as a person. So when I was discovering my discomfort, I had to sort of look back as far as I could for moments where I did feel uncomfortable, or things didn't quite make sense to me. The earliest one that I can sort of remember is going to church when I mustn't have been older than sort of 5 or 6. My parents had bought my sister and I matching dresses, and it was like the night sky, it was black, it had stars and moons on it, and I remember not wanting to be in it. Just this really strong feeling of that doesn't belong on me and I don't want it. And being 4 or 5, I couldn't convey what I was feeling at that time, but I remember sort of being up against the wall of a hallway, sort of saying, no, I don't want to wear this, and that was probably the earliest thing, and only one sort of distinct memory that I can remember from childhood. When I started to develop, as young women do, my father became increasingly uncomfortable with me not wearing clothes or not being fully covered in the house. And it kind of baffled me at the time, because I was thinking that my chest looks just like yours. Why do you not have to wear a shirt, and why do I? But it wasn't sort of outside of my own head. This was reiterated with trips to the beach growing up, where I longed to be shirtless like the men were, but it didn't quite click that that's what I wanted. The beach was always somewhere that I was super uncomfortable. I never wore a bikini, mainly because I don't have, enough up top. But there's also this immense discomfort with going to the beach and looking like a girl. So I tended to wear shorts, either board shorts or basketball shorts that I was never out of as a kid, and a men's rashie and my swimsuit, trying to cover up my nipples. I remember being so embarrassed by my nipples every time we went to the beach, but I didn't know that it had anything to do with being feminine. I just thought that they were too poignant and they needed to be covered because there was something to be embarrassed about. And it wasn't until this whole journey that I sort of started to realize that no, they're a feminine aspect, and I wanted to hide that part of myself. So I got out of high school, and the skirts and the skirts that we were made to wear, because there wasn't any pants in the girls' uniform, I hated them, and they were left behind to rot. We had this horrible hip-hugging blouse that just stayed on the hips, and I hated that. It reiterated parts of myself that I didn't want or didn't think that I should have. And I have, since high school, never ever worn anything hip-hugging again. I don't wear feminizing clothing. I don't want to draw attention to those parts of myself, but it hadn't clicked the reason why. I tried once or twice many years later to try and feel good in a dress or a skirt, but it felt almost foreign, sort of like the body that I was putting it on didn't belong to me. I was trying to prove to myself that I could if I had to, and I confused a dormant dysphoria with dysmorphia. I thought that all girls hated these parts of their bodies, and because it was the way we were conditioned to, through the media, not to like ourselves, but I didn't realise that it was just me in that group of people. So moving past high school was over, uni started, and it was the first time that I got to experiment with clothing. So I bought my own clothes. I was still uncomfortable in my own body, but I could at least present in a more comfortable way on the outside. So when I was shopping predominantly in the male section. If I ever did go into the female section, it was for the baggiest, most masculine shirts that I could find in that area. I used to wear just t-shirts, like patterned t-shirts, and an overshirt to hide myself. And I think I owned the same pair of denim shorts that I wore for work, and I wore 3 pairs of the same type of jeans because they were baggy and they didn't show anything, and I had sneakers on. And then I chopped off all my hair, but it still hadn't clicked. And then, I sort of came out as a lesbian towards the end of my first year of uni, and I just thought I was a boyish girl, even though I felt like that word, girl, never fit me. When I was working during this time, it was just at like a little fish and chip shop for a couple of years of uni, while I was studying, and I got confused as a young man once I'd cut off my hair, mainly by, older members of society, but being called, young lad or handsome or young man never worried me at all. It felt nice. But again, it didn't click. We used to have a joke when people used to call me what they thought was my right gender, and we'd be like, oh, well, I guess, they realised, whereas I'm like, keep calling me a man. But again, did not click. And then uni was over, and I had to go and get a job in the real world, like adults have to do, and I had to go back to the store and buy more clothes, but this time I had to look professionally. Professionally? I had to look professional. And, I thought I was a girl, so I went to shop for, things like blouses, and I wore things that wouldn't show my body. I wore very plain blouses. I liked darker colours. I wore slacks, and I wore one pair of boots that I could walk in, and I wore them to the ground, and then I would go and buy the same pair of boots, and that would happen sort of every year. I didn't want to look feminine, I just wanted to be comfortable. You know, it was that sort of time that I started getting compliments on my appearance when I would wear something that was a little bit out of the ordinary for me, and that made me feel weird. Doing anything slightly more feminine made me feel wrong. I recently read an article by a woman called Amanda Ronan, titled Gender Identity versus Gender Desire, which I'll link down below. I think if you're in a situation like me, that is a really important read. You know, she brings a couple of points to the table that I felt myself, and I will share a couple here. I'm guessing a few others who have gone through a transition a little bit older are going to resonate with a few of these. The first point she makes is a quote, "I've always known what I wanted, but only recently did I learn who I was. I knew I wanted to present masculine. I knew I liked it when people mistook me for a male, but it took a long time to realize that I am a male, and that's how I want the entire world to perceive me. Even when I sought out gender therapy, I didn't know if this was the road that I was going to go down. I pretended that I was okay, and eventually it all came out. I tried to tell myself I believed I was a woman, so I didn't have to be trans. I could just try and find a balance of being comfortable as I was. 27 years that hasn't worked for me, but I was trying to convince myself that that was the case. Much like Amanda in the article. You know, it was a lie I was trying to tell myself, and it just fizzled out the deeper I got into sort of research. You know, the deeper I got into my research. I'm going to share this part of the article. I am going to put it on the screen. It feels like I could have written it myself, and I think that will be the case for a lot of others. And it is going to be in reverse. So she's talking about being a trans woman. I'm a trans male, so this is her quote. "And of course, that was not a sudden revelation. It came in small increments. It started off as curious, then questioning again, then trans feminine, then a trans woman, and finally a woman. At each step, I refused to believe I was anything more, to later realize I was simply afraid to apply a label to the experience I was already living. My gender identity began as gender desire. Being a woman began as a desire to have a feminine body and to be seen and treated as a woman. Girl, same. Just as a man." And I think that little paragraph is quite powerful for a lot of us who are doing this outside of their teens. Just because it's dormant, just because you can't put it into words, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that you're faking it. All of our experiences are going to be completely different. How I feel my dysphoria is going to be different to how you or somebody else feels dysphoria. If you didn't know as a child, that's okay. If you didn't know until you had children, that's okay. If you don't embrace it until you're in your 80s, that's okay. It doesn't make your identity any less valid than mine or anybody else. Okay, so that is it from me. It was a bit rambly, but I think there are a lot of really important points that are made in this article and what I've talked about today. I think we put so much shit on each other for not having the same experiences or not following this linear narrative that we think that we need to. So if you made it to the end, thank you for watching as always. I will see you next time. The series is going to continue. I've got 4 or 5 more videos that are going to go up, so if you're interested, keep watching. If not, don't click view. Alright, have a good day. Okay, bye. Yay, we're done.